Dave, so could you give us, I noticed, and we see this every time, so you went to Oxford University and then you moved to Spain and you began being a secondary teacher there. Can I ask you, what prompted you to become a secondary school teacher once you left Oxford?
Well, I suppose, in fact, when I went to Spain as part of my university studies at Oxford, I was actually in a school. So I worked in a school for a year, like doing conversation classes in English.
Right.
And I immediately enjoyed that.
Right.
And then when I went back, I went straight to do teacher training. So yeah, it was actually because it was part of my language studies at Oxford. Yeah.
Okay, right. So to do a placement and start teaching straight away.
Yeah. So I even started teaching before I became a teacher. I was even teaching when I was still at university.
Right. Oh, brilliant. Cool. And then, so you moved to Spain. That was quite a quick decision. You sort of just decided to move to Spain straight after uni.
Well, in fact, straight after then I did my PGCE, which is the teaching qualification in the UK, and I did that in York, in fact, the University of York, which was a great place to do it, because actually it was at the forefront of communicative teaching of French and Spanish. So in fact, I trained to be a teacher of French and Spanish before I trained to be an English teacher.
Oh, right. Maybe that boded quite well for your future then, to see things from that angle.
Yeah. And of course, what we're forgetting is love, of course. So when I came to Spain the first time, I met my future wife, and that was why Spain forever, because of my.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. An insight into Dave's love life, everybody. There you go.
Oh, l'amour. That's it. It's always a question of love.
That's an extremely historical education you had, Oxford and then York. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, old towns.
Yeah, Oxford was a beautiful place, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure, as a lot of you know, at some point after that, well, not at some point, in 1994, Dave began writing for Macmillan. And he wrote Gateway First Edition, then he wrote Gateway Second Edition. And now, Dave, do you want to do the honours?
Yeah, so actually today I'm very excited because I can actually give you the title of my new series. And so my new series is called Gateway to the World. And of course, this is a great moment to say that because I'm speaking to the world right now. I've seen people from everywhere. So my new course, Gateway to the World, and you'll see a few examples from Gateway to the World today. So I hope you like it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave. We'll be telling you, I mean, you'll see, as Dave said, you'll see some more examples of Gateway to the World during his session. We'll be telling you more about the course as a whole after Dave's finished his session. So do stick around for that. And also a new teacher development course that Dave has designed, which we're going to be telling you about a little bit later on. I think that's it from me, Dave. I'm gonna hand over to you if you don't mind.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great.
Take it easy, everyone. Bye-bye.
Excellent. So I imagine that everybody can hear me. It is amazing, as always, to see people from around the world. Lots of people from Georgia, from Russia, from Spain, as always, from Vietnam, from literally everywhere. And, I really do appreciate it. Every time I give a talk, I appreciate people finding the time to join me. It's really an honor that teachers, as always, are so keen to follow training courses. Now, today, I hope you're feeling good. That's the title of my session, Feeling Good, Social and Emotional Learning in the Secondary Classroom. So obviously, I'm talking particularly about teenagers. Actually, I think a lot of what I say is also true really for ourselves as teachers. I think teachers also need social and emotional learning and social emotional intelligence. I'm going to be talking for about 50 minutes. And after that, I would be happy to answer any questions you have. I will try to read your comments in the chat box if I can, if you have questions. If not, please repeat your question at the end of the session. And always, if you have ever been to any of my webinars before, you'll probably know that I love asking you questions. And please just type in your answers into the chat box all the time. By the way, always nice to see so many friends and so many familiar names here. I've seen Isabel, I've seen Renata, who I've been in touch with recently, and Andrea from from Slovakia, right? Lovely to see you all. Okay, now we're going to start with the bad news. Okay, we're going to start with thinking about some negative things. Okay, and afterwards we're going to go all positive. But let's start with the bad news. I do believe that today teenagers are facing probably more problems now than, for example, when I was a teenager many years ago. I imagine that most of you are teachers of teenagers, and I imagine that all of you have been teenagers at some moment in your lives. Can you type in the chat box any problems that you think are typical problems that today's teenagers face? Would you like to share any ideas? Bullying, Verena has said, very much. Boredom, digital bullying, cyberbullying, right? Anxiety, hormones, so that's always, yeah. Love problems, contacting friends, I think somebody said. Overload of homework, peer pressure. Actually, this is very sad that you're so good at, at discovering all of these problems, right? Not being understood, motivation, family pressure, parent issues, right? And, you know, there are, unfortunately, I think we would have to admit, there are quite a few problems, aren't there? Here are some ideas that I had, which I think you've mentioned most of them: peer pressure, friends. I've put typical adolescent worrying. We've got bullying, cyberbullying, isolation. And, you know, by isolation, I do mean that at the moment, I'm sure in all of your countries, you're suffering some form of confinement to some degree. My students can't really go out much at the moment. Which, you know, really is a big problem in 2021. And of course, this pandemic is difficult for everybody, but I think it's also particularly difficult when you're growing up. Now, you know, we've got things like modern problems like social media, which can, I read recently in the newspaper, the headline was that bad news spreads faster amongst teenagers than good news, which is really sad. Now, I don't want to sort of, you know, to be too depressed or depressing, but I think that the reason why we are interested probably in the topic of social and emotional learning today is because I think that nowadays, you know, there are a few more problems. And Lourdes has just sort of put her finger on the pulse of the question. The problem comes when people don't know how to handle their emotions. And that's exactly what we're going to look at in this session now. Now, let's get some good news. Can anybody identify this country? The flag is helping, I suppose. Denmark, that was good. Verena, you were very fast there. It's actually Denmark, okay? Now, Denmark, why am I going to talk about Denmark? Well, I'm going to talk about Denmark because it says that according to the United Nations World Happiness Report, Denmark is one of the happiest places on earth. Maybe we should all go to Denmark, okay? With that, it might seem obvious that the country has something to teach itself and the rest of the world. What would that something be? Can anybody suggest? What is it? What could Denmark teach the rest of the world? Any ideas? Any idea? Happiness? Happiness is a relative thing, that's true. How to be happy? Work-life balance, positive? Okay, well, nobody's actually said the word at the moment. The word is empathy. And Denmark is the first country in the world. Yes, Irem has just said, no, empathy. They are the first country in the world that has begun to teach empathy as part of the school curriculum. And they do indeed, for a while now, they have been teaching empathy and also understanding and sharing feelings. Okay, now that's quite a progressive thing to do. And basically what they're teaching is social and emotional learning. So what is social and emotional learning? Well, in a nutshell, okay, we could give a longer definition. Social and emotional learning is being able to understand and manage your emotions. And this can help you to express how you feel and what you want or need more effectively. So the first stage of social and emotional learning is understanding yourself and understanding your emotions. But that in turn can help you to understand and manage other people and their emotions. So if you can recognize your emotions, it can help you to recognize emotions in other people. And that can help you to interact with them more effectively. So we begin, if you like, with emotional intelligence, knowing yourself, and we develop that into understanding other people better and interacting with them more effectively. And this is really what we are going to be looking at, of how we can do that from the English language classroom teaching teenagers. By the way, you know that you will be getting the PDF with the slides from this session. Also, at the end of this session, I will be giving you a little reading list. If you want to discover more about social and emotional learning, I will give you some sources. This is one very useful source. This is CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social and Emotional Learning. And they developed this framework, which I think is really useful. It's the one I think which is most widely used. By the way, there are many different organizations that organize these things in different ways. I don't think it's too important. I think this is one way, and I personally find it useful. And I have designed my talk around these 5 different areas that you can see there. So we're going to begin with self-awareness, then self-management, then we're going to look at social awareness, relationship skills, and finally, responsible decision-making. Now, this is not mine. This is from the CASEL organization, and they have divided self-awareness into many more areas, okay? But you can see the most important thing about self-awareness is things like identifying your own strengths, identifying your own emotions, having a growth mindset. That means that you believe that you can change, you believe that you can get better. And obviously, as teachers, I think that we all believe in a growth mindset. We all believe that we can help our students to feel better, to learn more, and to change. Now, one typical thing that we do in English language classes are little personality tests, right? And students often enjoy these, I think, because they are at a period of their lives where they are sort of discovering themselves. And sorry, I'm getting attacked by a fly here. Students enjoy discovering more about themselves. And when we do a personality test in the English language classroom, I always remind my students not to take it too seriously, okay? So it's interesting, but it's not too serious, but it's something that we can use to have a little bit of fun with and maybe to discover something about ourselves. Now, don't do this in the chat box, because this is private, okay? It's for you. But there are 5 little sentences, and very quickly on a piece of paper or anywhere you like, this is from Gateway to the World, okay? From my new series of Gateway, which is just about to appear in all good bookshops very soon. Have a look at those sentences, and each one, just decide very quickly, is your answer A or B? Okay, don't share it in the chat box, just write for yourself, A or B. Okay, so at the weekend, I would prefer to stay at home watching a series, or B, go to a party. This is B2 level, okay? This is just a mini test before they read a text. Okay, so I'm imagining that you're answering all of those questions, A and B. You don't have to share them in the chat box, but just make a note. You can make a mental note. And what I want you to do is decide, do you have more answers that are A or B? Okay, just do a quick calculation. More A's or more B's? And of course, people have got different answers, and people have, you know, I don't even know which question you're answering at the moment. So it's all pretty anonymous. But yeah, more A or more B. Can anybody guess in the chat box, what area of personality do you think we are pinpointing? Somebody's actually, Elena, I think, has mentioned the word already. What area? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is looking particularly at the question of being introverted, more introverted, shall we say, or more extrovert. And as I said, this is not to take too seriously, but it's just an interesting question. Of course, actually, did you know that there is a word in English which is ambivert? Did you know? I didn't know that before, but it's an ambivert. So an ambivert is somebody who's like more or less in the middle, which I suspect is many of us are also ambiverts. Now, the reason that I am very interested in this question of introvert and extrovert is, has anybody heard of Susan Kane? She's written 2 excellent books. One of them is called Quiet and the other is called Quiet Power. Quiet Power is particularly talking about young people, okay? And she makes a very good point also in her excellent TED Talk, The Power of Introverts. She makes the point that society today always seems to value more the extroverts. It tends to value the people who make the most noise. It tends to value the loudest people. But of course, introverts, and there are many famous introverts, including Einstein, including J.K. Rowling, including Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Many introverts are extremely powerful people. So she talks about the power of quiet. And I don't know about you, and you probably see me making webinars and I seem like a loud person and I speak a lot, but actually I would definitely categorize myself as an introvert. I prefer being quiet, believe it or not. I force myself to do this, but I'm more of a quiet person. And I believe in the classroom, I believe that we need to make sure we don't ignore the quiet people. The quiet people have got a lot to offer us. We need to encourage them and respect them. Now, this again is from Gateway to the World, B2, my new book. This is a collaborative project. There are 5 projects which appear in each level. And we develop different skills in these projects. And one of them is collaboration. Okay, and if you read this, it says when you work in a team, it's essential to listen to everyone and let everybody contribute. Sometimes 1 or 2 people can dominate in a group, but the best teams have a balance between everybody, including the quieter members of the team. And we can give them useful language to encourage them to collaborate better. What do you think, Sarah? Let's listen to Oscar, who hasn't spoken. It's Olga's turn. So really encouraging students to collaborate and to encourage the quieter people to collaborate. And I do believe from all my experience of teenage classes, some louder people do tend to dominate the classroom. And I think that it's very important to encourage all of our students to contribute with what they can. Yeah, and Elena has mentioned working individually and then sharing, and we're going to talk about that right now. How can we as teachers be sensitive to different personality types? Well, I'm going to give a few ideas. I'm sure these are things that you already do, but just to remind you, okay? The first thing is what I've already mentioned, encouraging contributions from our quieter students. Diplomatically dosing the contributions of louder students. What do I mean diplomatically dosing? What I mean is that many, I think some students, when I visit classrooms, there often seems to be 2 or 3 people who answer every question. And it's great that they volunteer. It's great that they want to answer, but sometimes we need to take those students apart and say, thank you. Okay, thank you for your contributions, but sometimes I need other people to answer too. So you make it clear that you appreciate their contributions, but try also to let other people join in and explain why that's important. So it's important to be diplomatic, but it's important also that you can be a little bit strict so that 1 person, 2 people do not dominate. Next, I would say, and this is the tricky part of being a teacher, is that you need to be sensitive to different degrees of shyness. What I mean is some people are very, very shy, and you might make them extremely uncomfortable by forcing them to speak in front of the class. Sometimes a student is a little bit shy and all they need is a little bit of a push, a gentle push to contribute and to do things in front of the class. So the difficult thing of being a teacher is that we have 25 people in a class, but somehow we need to adapt our approach by guessing, by a little bit of psychology, right? I think teachers are also psychologists. We need to try and read the minds of some of our students to know how much we should and can push them. And of course, you know, this is easier said than done. I'm not pretending this is easy, but it's one of the skills I think as a teacher we have to try and learn, trying to adapt our approach according to each individual. And the bigger the class, the more difficult that is. Somebody, I think it was Elena, mentioned before individual work and then whole class. And I believe very strongly that in the ELT classroom, we need to vary individual work, pair work, group work, and whole class work. And we need to shift that so that we are adapting our approach. Another trick is trying to find the best partner for each student, or allowing each student to find their favorite partner. And I think that's important for people to feel comfortable. I do also think that it's good to vary your pairs occasionally, so there is a certain amount of freshness, so that people don't get too comfortable in the one place with the one partner. Right, and also this is a little trick that I think is really useful. When you do pair work, talking about something personal, I nearly always get my students to feedback about their partner, because if they can feedback about their partner, it's slightly less personal, it's slightly less sensitive. So that's one trick that I use very frequently. Feedback about your partner, not about yourself. Somehow it's easier sometimes to talk about another person than about yourself. Sensitive correction. So I've talked about this in all of my grammar sessions. Sometimes we go grammar mad and we only listen to the grammar. And in the teenage classroom, it's extremely important in terms of social and emotional interaction that we listen to what our students are saying. We don't just listen to the present perfect or the first conditional, right? We listen to the message, not just to the English. And finally, building confidence and self-esteem in all of our students. I think that particularly today, because of the reasons we've mentioned, of the hard times that many teenagers are having, we need to try and build their confidence, build their self-esteem. Now, this is something from Gateway to the World, my new course, and it's looking at confidence and self-esteem. The students watch a video about a young teenager who learns to be more confident by writing poetry, okay, and which is a nice idea. What we've got on this double page is these 9 ideas, and I'm not going to read them. I want you to have a quick look through them yourself. Remember, you will get a handout later. These are just 9 ideas for thinking more positively, for building belief in yourself. We get the students to think about these 9 different qualities, and we get them to rank them in this diamond shape you can see on the right. So at the top, they put the suggestions that they think are the most powerful and the ones that they think are less powerful for them. Each student will have different answers, and so they can share their answers. They don't have to agree. The important thing is that the students are considering these different qualities, thinking positively. Number 2, remember that perfect doesn't exist. And I'm sure that you are the same as me. I think it's important for students and also for teachers to remember that perfect doesn't exist. Have you ever taught a perfect lesson? When I come out of a lesson or come out of a webinar, I always think that was good, but I could have done this better. I could have done that better. And so we need to remind ourselves and not only remind our students that perfect doesn't exist. Okay, so these are simple suggestions for building your self-esteem. And what the students end up doing is individually writing a list of some things you're good at, some of your successes, some things you've done for other people. Let's think about some of those things. Let's think on the positive side. And I know that some people might think, well, you know, you can be over positive. Well, maybe at the moment we need to be going on the positive side, not on the negative side. Let's think about the good things. Let's think about what we can do better. But let's remember that we need to think positively in difficult situations. Okay, so you know, we need to build that self-confidence. Now, I meanwhile think that the most important thing about social and emotional learning for me is self-management. Self-management. Wonderful quotation. Okay, feelings are much like waves. We can't stop them from coming, but we can choose which one to surf. Right? So when we're feeling negative emotions, we can go and become much more negative. If we decide to surf that negative emotion, we can become really negative. The point is, let's surf the positive emotions. In a classroom of teenagers, I really do believe that, you know, teenagers are at an age where they're going through so many different emotions, so quickly. Many of our students go through all of these emotions in the space of 10 minutes. And it's very difficult to control your emotions, but I think as a teenager is the moment when we need to start trying to control our emotions. And I think that it's been shown a few times that actually self-management can help our academic progress. This is from the Edutopia website, which is actually part of George Lucas's educational forum. Again, it's worth looking at because they have lots of information about social and emotional learning. They argue that students who are more self-aware and confident about their learning get better results, they do better, they perform better. If you can manage stress, if you can organize your work, then you are going to be a more successful learner. And I personally believe that is true. So what is self-management? Self-management is the idea of controlling your emotions to some extent. It's impossible to control everything maybe, but to start controlling your emotions, self-discipline, self-motivation, using planning and organizational skills. And interestingly, the last one, identifying and using stress management to control how you feel. So I talked a little bit about this last week in my cafe session, and I will be repeating some of that. How do you manage your stress and anxiety? Yes, Zoya, exactly. Never give up. This is something that links back to the session that I did recently about thinking skills. And one of the problems that I think teenage students have is that they need to take very important study choices. When teenage students have to decide, are they going to study this subject or that subject? Are they going to study more arts or more sciences? And these decisions are important decisions that will affect the rest of their lives. So they are actually quite stressful decisions. What I explained in my thinking session is this compass points routine. I'm just going to explain it again quickly. We've got north, south, east, and west. North, if you look at number 1, what would you need to know? So imagine our students are at an age where they need to choose what they're going to study next, if they're going to go to another school, if they're going to go to university, what they are going to study. In that situation, number 1, if you look in the box, number 1, what would you need to know that could help you to prepare for this situation? Okay, so that's step number 1. That's really useful. What would you need to know? Number 2, what steps could you take to deal with the situation in a positive way? Step number 3, E, is for exciting. Okay, what could be exciting about being in this situation? What positives can you find in this situation? And W is for worries. What worries would you have? So in other words, we've got this stressful situation, okay, which is trying to decide what you are going to do next in your life. What are you going to study? I'm suggesting this approach called compass points. What do you need to discover? What steps can you take? So how can you discover that information? What is exciting about this situation? So all situations have an exciting side and they also have a worrying side. And remember that a problem shared is a problem halved. So even if we're thinking about the worries, if we discuss those worries, if we share these ideas, then we are going to halve our problems. So yes, as Dr. Sonali has said, it is a really nice framework. It's just a simple framework to deal with any stressful situation. In fact, not just this situation, but any stressful situation. So remember, this will be on your handout, on the PDF that you will receive, and it comes from Gateway to the World. We'll be mentioning more about Gateway to the World later. Now, this is really important. This is also from Gateway to the World. This exercise is getting advice from past students, and I would say that this is really useful. What you can do at the end of the school year is get your students to reflect how they felt at the beginning of the year, what worries they had, and how they dealt with those worries. And they can share that information. They can pass on that information to new students the next year, right? So it says, new kid at school, advice from past students. If you look at number 1, I was worried about make friends, but you just need, remember, lots of people are probably in the same position as you. Now, I think that you can see that we've got a verb and we need to put the verb in the gerund or the infinitive. Can you write the correct form of make there? I imagine you can. That is correct. It's making, okay? Because after a preposition, we need the gerund, right? So I was worried about making. What about the second one? You just need remember, to remember. Thank you. You were very quick. I think that was Stella again. I saw somebody. Excellent work. Right. Now, the point that I want to make is that we are doing 2 things at the same time. We're sending positive messages to our students about stressful situations. We're helping our students to deal with this new stressful situation. And we are also doing some really useful English grammar. And if you use Gateway, you'll know that I particularly like activities that do 2 things at the same time, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, as I usually say. So I think it's really useful. The content of our grammar exercise is actually also sending a really positive message. So grammar is not just grammar. Grammar can be used in a context where we're also reinforcing social and emotional learning, okay? So that's the point that I wanted to make, that we can incorporate, we can integrate social and emotional learning into English language teaching really easily. Yes, and Natalia has just said SEL underlines every field. That is very important, that it's not just a one-off, it's part of everything we do in every subject, right? Now, my next question, we're talking about stress, right? My next question is it better for students to avoid all stress or to learn live with it? What do we reckon? Yes, exactly, Amanda. Yeah. Live with it, right? I mean, it's a stupid question maybe, okay? But I think it's really important for us to realize, I think when we have children, we want to protect our children from stress and from hard situations, but it's impossible, right? Life always has difficult situations and stress. And being a teenager, it means that you're at an age where you're learning to live with it, to cope with it better. I did a session last year that some of you maybe came to, all about comfort zones, okay? And this diagram is sort of showing your comfort zone. It's showing the danger zone, and it's showing what we call the optimal performance zone. And there is the theory that to help our students to do well, they should be working in the optimal performance zone, which means not too relaxed, not too stress-free, okay? That sounds maybe wrong, but I think it's true, isn't it? If you think of your students, the student who is incredibly relaxed, who is incredibly chilled out, is maybe not the student who is performing as well as they can. And so the idea here is that we're pushing students a little bit, and this is the skill of a teacher, I think, is pushing the students a little bit and not too much. In fact, I saw this very recent article from the newspaper. Failing 15% of the time is the best way to learn, say scientists, okay, after research. And so the idea here is, it says, like, it's the Goldilocks zone where it's not too easy. Now, I think obviously it's not too easy and it's not too difficult. And I think if we think of the English language classroom, we can tell often, can't we? When an activity is too difficult, we clearly see the stress and we clearly see that students are not performing. But when an activity is too easy, we can also see that students are not really learning. And I always feel this in a secondary classroom. When things are too easy, you know, I don't think you get much good work. So we need to be aiming high. And yeah, as Isabel, hello, Isabel. Isabel says, yeah, it's the right amount of stress. Difficult to calculate, but we need to try and give. Exactly. Hela said, we always need some challenge. And I think we agree, right, as teachers. Too easy is not good. Too difficult is not good either. The problem is then, when it is too easy, and somebody has mentioned this, how do we make sure our students don't get depressed? How do we make sure our students suffer? Now, this is part of the session that I gave last week that I know many of you have seen. I was talking about resilience, tenacity, and grit. And I mentioned some ways that we can encourage resilience in the classroom. The first was encouraging a positive response to correction. So, you know, criticism and correction, we don't usually like it, do we, as human beings? I've got this quotation. This is a beautiful quotation. This is Franklin P. Jones. This makes me laugh, okay? Honest criticism is hard to take, particularly from a relative, a friend, or a stranger. In other words, I think basically Franklin P. Jones is saying that honest criticism is always hard to take, right? And as human beings, we are human beings. I don't particularly like honest criticism to begin with. We have to get used to it, right? And when we're learning a language, it's normal that we make mistakes. We need to explain to our students the process of learning a language. If we don't make mistakes, we're not learning. I mentioned fail. Fail, F-A-I-E, first attempt in learning. Getting things wrong is normal, but it's part of learning, and we have to encourage our students to do that. We need to keep our students focused on realistic long-term goals. I mentioned last week, I saw a book recently, Learn English in 7 Days. I told my class, if they want the bad news and the good news, the bad news is you cannot learn English in 7 days. The good news is that you can learn some English every day, right? And you can learn some English every lesson. And that's really, you know, that's not being funny. That's a really important message. To get to the final destination of being an advanced learner is little by little, day by day, lesson by lesson, making some sort of progress. That's what we want to aim for. Receptive skills. We all have students who panic when they don't understand a word in a listening text or in a reading text. They panic, they stop listening, they stop reading. We need to explain to students why they should not give up when they don't understand a word. You don't need to understand every word. You need to understand the gist. We know that. We need to explain it to our students so they are resilient when they listen and when they read. We need to help students recognize strengths and weaknesses. Some students are good at fluency, some are good at accuracy, some are good at speaking, some are good at writing. Not everybody is good, and I would say nobody is bad at everything. So what are you good at? What do you need to work harder on? But let's explain that learning language is complex. They need to take the good with the bad. Point out the aims of activities. So why are we doing this? So you might not like this activity, but I'm going to explain why we need to stick at it and we need to do it. Last week I explained basketball players. They play the same shot thousands of times to get better. So we need to encourage students to keep at it. And, even if it's not fun, they should do it again. Grammar exercises might not be fun, but we know they are useful. Let's explain why. And let's point out role models of tenacity in different walks of life. These are two amazing people from Gateway to the World, okay? One is Maureen Beck. She was born without one hand, without one arm, and she has climbed some of the most amazing mountains in the world. Shaquem Griffin is a famous American football player. He only can play with one hand. One hand was amputated when he was just 4, and he is a top American football player. Let's stress these different role models of tenacity to our students. And I shared these quotations, which I think are inspirational. And I think just the first one, the others are important, but the first one, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Tim Notke apparently was a basketball coach, and this quotation is a great quotation, right? And we all know in the classroom, we have some very talented students who don't work very hard. And we've got some less talented students maybe who are working really hard and getting better results. Ideally, we want a combination of both. Okay. I do think that self-management, that section was longer because I think it's maybe the key to the whole question of teenagers learning better in the classroom. Mariam, I'll try and answer your question at the end of the session, okay? So remind me of your question. I'll carry on at the moment. Social awareness, okay? Now that includes taking other people's perspectives. Empathy. I began with Denmark, talking about how empathy is a school subject in Denmark. Empathy is so important in the world, isn't it? Understanding things from a different position. This is a beautiful quotation from To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm sure most of us have read this book. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around with it. And that's a great quotation. To understand other people, let's put ourselves into their position. And that's what we're going to see now. This is another spread from Gateway to the World. This is B1+. And it's thinking about attitudes between young people and old people, between teenagers and senior citizens. Now, in Gateway to the World, in each of these spreads, we have a video. And the video is, in this case, it's from a nationwide British documentary where a middle-aged doctor wants to find out what it feels like to be old. I imagine that you could just about see some of the pictures there. So he walks around London and somebody actually stands up in the metro to let him sit down, and he is pleasantly surprised by the attitude of younger people to him. Now, somebody mentioned in the chat box that, I think in today's society, sometimes we don't respect older people as much. Yeah, exactly, for Hannah. They offer him a seat, which is a really nice moment. And also people get out of his way as he's going up the stairs, which is a really lovely moment. A moment to get our students to think about this, to think about, okay, so just because you're old, we need to respect people, and also older people need to respect teenagers. Maybe teenagers often get a bad press. Okay. Now in Gateway, we're really trying to encourage students to be great learners and also to think about others. We've got Unit 1, open-minded and positive. Unit 8, showing empathy and kindness. And I think that these things are simple reminders to students nowadays that these things are important. And as we always say, generally, I think we would agree that if you respect others, then others will respect you. And I think this is part of being a teenager and growing up. Now, also in Gateway to the World, in this new course of mine, we do a lot of culture exchanges where we look at a feature of life in an English-speaking country. In this case, we're talking about school food in Australia. And then we compare it with school food in our country. But what we try to teach the students is to have respect, intercultural awareness, so that the students think about, okay, things are different. Why possibly are they different? Why possibly are they similar? What makes teenagers similar around the world, or what makes them different? So in other words, not seeing other cultures as strange, but seeing other cultures as something to investigate and to be open-minded about. Now, the next thing that I want to look at is relationship skills. So again, this is important in the English language classroom because we've got things like the last 2 points there. Practicing teamwork, that's something that we do very frequently, right, in the English language classroom. Collaborative problem solving, that's something that we've seen in my collaborative projects. Communicating effectively. Now, I'm sure that some of you have seen this before. This is from Gateway 2nd edition, B2+. And this is a life skill, a really important life skill, how to express yourself, right? This is B2+. How do you communicate effectively? And as English language teachers, that's what we want to teach, right? Effective communication. You can just about read those 4 tips. Think before you speak. Now, again, that's easier said than done, right? We generally speak and think afterwards. But let's encourage our teenagers to think. What are you going to say? How are you going to say it? Yeah. Number 2, be assertive. Be assertive doesn't mean being bossy. It means expressing what you really think in a polite way and staying calm. And, you know, the tip here is when you suddenly get angry, breathe and wait for a second. How many times in the English language classroom, in your classroom with teenage students, does somebody start getting angry and saying things that they shouldn't say? Give them space. Just wait for 30 seconds before you continue, okay? So as a teenager, beginning to control those strong emotions. Again, easier said than done, but what we're trying are the first steps to get there. Tip number 3 is remembering to listen. When we think of communication, we think of speaking, but effective communication is about active listening. Are you really listening to what the other person is saying? And tip number 4, watch your body language. We think again of communication as words, but I think you would agree many of our teenage students are sending off very strong body language all the time. A student who is yawning in class, sitting like this, is sending very clear body language to you and to other people in the classroom. So let's remind them about these communication tips. These tips are useful not just in one unit of a book, they're useful in every unit, in every subject, and in fact in life outside the classroom too. And my final point before we get to the question session, making responsible decisions. And one of these things is using critical thinking. So critical thinking, think critically before you make your decision. Really, really important. And we try and teach that in Gateway. A reasoned judgment, resolving conflicts constructively. And this is just a little trick. This is a little routine. So when you've got group problems, maybe even a class problem with something is going wrong in your class, try this, okay? This is the ABCDE problem solving. To solve problems with group dynamics, try to A, ask. So what is the problem? Okay, what is the problem or challenge the group is facing? B, brainstorm, okay? What are the possible solutions? Okay, so first ask, second brainstorm. C, choose, pick one of your ideas, okay? Sometimes when we have lots of ideas, we don't do any of them. Let's choose one idea. D, let's do it. Okay, put your idea into action. And E, evaluate. How did the idea work? Do you need to choose a new idea? Did it work or did it not work? Okay, so A, B, C, D, E, problem solving, just a simple way of confronting a particular problem in a positive way. And finally, okay, what do our students want from us? So in the 21st century, in 2021, what do the students want from their teachers? This was a survey from the Times Educational Supplement, and I will give you the source in 2 seconds. They asked teenagers what they want from their secondary students. Can you guess the top 10? Some of you are already guessing. I love this. Support, understanding, guidance. They want us to be friends, consideration, empathy. Right, now this is really interesting. This is the top 10. I'm going to show you the top 10. Just look at those. Now, what I find fascinating, and in fact, the article discusses this because this is really interesting. Many of these things are not skills that we learn as teachers. They are personal characteristics. They are part of our personality, and they're very difficult to learn. We can maybe develop them, but some of them are difficult to develop. You know, number 1 is funny, and number 2 is fun. Number 9 is passionate. Number 5 is a good listener. So I think this is fascinating that what our students want, I mean, number 7 is knowledgeable. Now, we think teachers, we are teachers because we know our subject, and that is the most important thing. And maybe it is, but students see knowledgeable as number 7. And before that, we've got funny, fair, understanding, helpful. That's really interesting, I think. What they want is personal help. So I think that's quite fascinating. Lastly, social and emotional learning. Somebody mentioned this before. It's not about a 20-minute activity. It's not just one lesson in the year. It's not one page, or it's not one activity in a book. It's part of everything that we're doing. You can't be an English teacher 1 minute and then suddenly become a social and emotional teacher 2 seconds later. We do it all. And I do think also that the materials that we use, these are 4 texts from Gateway to the World. And as I said before, I think that, you know, positive messages should be part of the grammar texts we use. They should be part of the vocabulary texts we use. We should be stressing positivity as much as we can. So lots of different texts addressing questions of parental problems, social media making us unhappy. One final thing, happiness is a pencil. Can you see that last text? This is a very strange experiment. But if you put a pencil between your teeth, apparently everything is funnier. So if somebody tells you a joke and you have a pencil in your mouth, it makes you smile, and making you smile makes you happier. Strange things that you can learn by using Gateway to the World. These are some of the sources that I have used today. The Castle.org, we've got Edutopia, we've got the TED Talk by Susan Kane, we've got that article about Denmark and how they teach empathy, and we've got the 25 traits that make a perfect teacher. That's a really interesting discussion there about whether students are right to want us to be funny or not. Remember that you will get a PDF, so you can take all of those links as soon as you get your PDF. Some of you have been asking a little bit, well, sorry about this. This is my favorite quotation, okay? I love this quotation. Follow your heart, which is good advice. Follow your heart, but take your brain with you. That's a pretty good quote, right? I think both things, head and heart, is the best way for us and for our students. Gateway to the World, I've been talking about that a little bit, and some of you have been asking for more information. You can check it out at macmillanenglish.com. Will tell you a little bit more about that. Also remember that you can always stay in touch with me, and many of you already do. Macmillan Gateway Facebook page, and we can stay in contact there as always. If you do have any questions that I can't answer now, then I'll answer them on the Gateway Facebook page. Do we have, Will, any time for some questions? A few questions, right?
Yes. Can you see me and hear me and everything, Dave?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yes. Thank you very much. Absolutely fantastic. As always, Dave.
Thank you.
Really informative, really thought-provoking and thoughtful session.
Thank you.
So thanks very much on behalf of all of the teachers that are saying thank you very much as well.
Yes,
for putting it all together for us. Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions if you've got time, Dave.
Sure.
So some questions about Gateway to the World. Where can you get it? Would you like me to answer that? Where, as in how they can get it?
Yes, you answer that one. Yes.
So if you go to, I'll tell you what, let me try and get the link here. If you go here, that's the link. If you can catch it in amongst all the praises for Dave, if you can catch that link, I'll put it up again. But we'll show you the link in a second again. If you go to the bottom there, it says to contact your local representative. So if you go to the Gateway to the World website, there's a link there where it will have the details for you to contact your local team, and they'll be able to get it to you. So Dave, a few questions actually about what you were talking about. So how can you cope with disruptive students without exposing them in front of the class?
Well, that's a really good question. And I usually say at the beginning of talks, remember that I am still in the classroom, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And I do know also that, you know, I think one or two people have mentioned this, that, you know, sort of like along the lines of it's easier said than done. And I would agree, you know, I mean, I'm giving you these ideas and I'm trying to sort of inspire people, but, you know, basically I'm also in the classroom, and I know that the classroom is not an ideal place. And, you know, if a teenage student is misbehaving in a way that is disruptive, you know, step number one is definitely making sure that that student cannot continue to do that, you know. So if you have to put them in their place, I prefer to do that individually, not in front of the rest of the class. So if possible, you know, take the student outside maybe for a second, explain clearly why you're not happy with that behavior, explain why that behavior is not acceptable, why it is counterproductive, explain why that student is one of a group, and that, you know, that the whole class needs to continue. So I suppose social and emotional learning is about, you know, being positive, being encouraging, but there are times, as that teacher is suggesting, I think, there are times when actually, you know, you have to put a student very clearly knowing what is acceptable and what isn't. So in the real world, you know, we need to address that. What you might do afterwards, though, of course, is, you know, make a mental note saying, okay, this student is trying to disrupt. Why are they trying to do it? Maybe we can then try to get to the root. Does the student feel ignored? Does the student feel above the level, below the level? So in other words, then investigate, I think, why that student is maybe behaving the way they're behaving. Right.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Okay, so we've got quite a few questions coming in now. So hopefully this will be quite a short one. So can you recommend any social and emotional learning reading, Dave? You've got the links that you put at the end. I'll put that slide back up because that's probably a good place to start. But if you've got anywhere else, anything else for them to read?
Actually, I have got a little book. I can mention it if you like, and the author is Jill Hasson. So that's Jill, Gill, and then Hasson, and it's just a lovely little small book, actually. So it's a really good book for teachers because it's not going into masses of psychology detail, and I think I've got it in front of me. In fact, it's called the Emotional Intelligence Pocketbook. Yeah,
I'll track that out.
So that's a nice book, but actually there is lots of material in that Edutopia worksite and also the Castle worksite. Those are sort of like, they are the to-go-to places, you know, if you check those out. There's lots of material, there's lots of background material, and also lots of practical activities and suggestions too, because they are for, you know, definitely for teachers.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dave. There was another really interesting question here. I think it's more of a suggestion, and what do you think? For me, the way I read it, it was following the video that you showed of the man that was dressed elderly. And they've asked, how would you deal with the feelings, or suggested, could you deal with the feelings that are shared between teenagers and the elderly? For example, not being considered important by society, or not perceiving themselves as important to society.
Yeah. So you were saying that that's like a suggestion, right, for sort of discussing?
It sounds like a suggestion for me to deal with that video.
Yeah, there's actually, I've been talking recently about thinking routines, and there are two really nice thinking routines as well that are excellent for this type of situation where you've got different people coming from different angles. One of them is called the circle of viewpoints, where you take a video and you get people to then take on the role of the person in the video and seeing things from their position, and then having dialogue, having a conversation between them. So that's really nice. Sometimes forcing somebody to take the role of a different person, as we saw with that quotation from To Kill a Mockingbird, where you actually get in somebody's skin, as it were, and see the world from their point of view. Somebody had a nice quotation as well that I saw that I can't remember now, which was about walking in somebody's footsteps. I can't remember now, but there was a nice quotation, seeing things through somebody else's eyes. It was something that,
yeah.
Judge somebody until you've been in their position, which is, an important way of seeing it.
Okay, great. Well, Astra has actually just put the question, and she asked this earlier. Asked this earlier, saying, "Many thanks for this great session. How can we integrate criticality, creative and reflective thinking tasks in mixed ability classes?"
Right. Well, I suppose, Azra, maybe there you're talking. I think one thing to bear in mind is, if you've got pretty strong mixed ability, where some of them, if the question is some of them are not going to be able to, to discuss, for example, in as much detail in English, I actually do believe that some of these are such important questions that maybe occasionally get them to allow them to discuss it maybe in their own language. If that's the problem. Problem is that you feel as if some students wouldn't be able to discuss it in sufficient detail, in sufficient depth, then I don't think it's a bad idea to get them to offer what they want to say in their own language. So if that's the main question, obviously, students will always respond to things in different ways, and according to their level of English is another matter. Even at the end of the lesson, sort of discussing some of these questions in more detail, possibly in the student's own language, could be really useful and productive. Some of these topics are very personal, so allowing them to discuss, if they feel frustrated expressing those emotions in English, then maybe let them do it from time to time in their own language.
Okay, cheers, Dave. Okay, so time for one more, I think. Another really good question. So how can you make sure that students get the hidden messages in language activity relating to SEL? So if they're reading a story, if they're reading a text, or listening to a text, I suppose, how can you ensure that they're actually getting the hidden meaning that's in there relating to SEL?
Right. Well, whether it's SEL or whether it's just critical thinking, if anybody uses Gateway, which somebody's asking me what I use, so I use Gateway myself, you'll know that I've always felt strongly from the very first edition. Sometimes we do comprehension and we ask true, false, and we ask comprehension questions, and they can answer them, but they've lost sight of the overall message in the text. And that's why in Gateway we've always done what about you? So what do you think about the ideas in the text? Or asking them a critical thinking, so do you, in the text it says that older people are important to society. Do you agree? Why? Justify your opinion. So I believe very strongly that whatever book you're using, at the end of the text, don't just do comprehension exercises. Don't just find out, if the students understand that he was wearing a hat and not a coat. Ask also the question about, well, okay, what was the text really about? How do you feel about the message in the text? And obviously for that, your texts need to be interesting texts, I think, as well. So, interesting texts, thought-provoking texts, texts that talk about some of these issues, and that could get students to give a personal reflection.
Right. Cheers, Dave.
One last thing I noticed a question, I think it was from somebody maybe called Deepika, who actually mentioned a really interesting question, which was, should families and headmasters and schools as a whole know about social and emotional learning? And of course, if you look at that Castle framework, in fact, it includes everything. So like I said before, social and emotional learning should be about a school ethos. Not just one teacher, and it should also be, even, you know, where possible, including parents in any sort of you know, some of these questions too.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Dave. There is actually another question which is going to lead on, because I want to tell people, I've got to tell people, I really have to tell people more about your new course. So I'm going to put this slide up now, but a quick question before I introduce it to them, Dave. Could you highlight any sort of the main differences between the second edition and this new edition?
Yeah, I mean, basically everything is new there. So the thing that people have always liked, like the format of the units, is pretty similar, and the whole philosophy is pretty similar. The main difference, I suppose, would be starting with what we've looked at today. With we have a new section, brand new section, which is Great Learners, Great Thinkers, where we address SEL, where we address thinking skills. We teach students to implement different thinking skills, and we're encouraging our learners to be great learners, to reach higher. And those spreads that we saw a few today, they all include real life videos too, which are brand new. Okay,
brilliant. Yeah.
There are lots of new elements. I mean, all of the texts are new. If you liked the flipped classroom videos, we've got 4 different types of flipped classroom videos now. And we also have, some more, me in some more flipped classroom videos, doing lots of silly things, trying to make your students laugh.
Which you loved making, Dave, you said. You absolutely adored making those videos. You had great fun.
Great fun. Lots of...
Great. All right, well, I want to tell you a bit more about this, guys, about Gateway to the World. You've seen lots of examples from the course that Dave's just mentioned to you. So I just want to give you a bit more of a sort of an overview of what it is and what it does for you, what it would do for you in your classroom. So it combines the brand new, so it's got lots of brand new content, as Dave just said. We've got digital tools for it now as well, just another sort of upgrade, I suppose, from the second edition, with that trusted methodology that you know from previous editions, the sort of the Gateway formula that hopefully by now you all know and love. So on top of the fact that Dave's got first-hand classroom experience, as he does to the day, he's still teaching these classes, that has really informed the content that he's written for Gateway to the World to help you equip your students with the language and the skills they need for their own lives. So far, it's prepared millions of students around the world to succeed in leaving their school and taking part in international exams, further study, the world of work. It's been tested, it's been perfected as a result of extensive research. Gateway to the World is full of fresh, relevant material for great lessons that will excite and motivate teenage learners and enable them to achieve their goals in school and life, with all of the things that Dave's just shown you today. You've got SEL, you've got the great thinkers, on top of everything else that you are familiar with his previous edition, Gateway second edition. So that's Gateway to the World.